The writing and directing duo of Madeleine Sims-Fuhr and Dusty Mancinelli has been making movies together for quite some time, and their latest is their feature film debut. Violation, which recently premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival and will also be playing at the Vancouver International Film Festival, is a stunning achievement. And unlike other films within this genre, the revenge thriller, this one takes a much more personal and much more realistic approach to the story, delving deep into the emotional trauma suffered by a woman who is trying to exact revenge for a wrong done to her. I recently had a chance to speak with Madeline and with Dusty about their particular take on the revenge film and how this film really gets under your skin. Congratulations on the movie. It's fantastic. Not an easy watch, but fantastic.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's tough. But thank you so much.
I kind of wanted to talk a little bit. I wanted to start by getting some insight into your move from short films into feature. You've made a number of short films. What was it about either this story or this particular time that you felt that now was a good opportunity to jump into making features?
Yeah, so we met at the TIFF Talent Lab in 2015, and we really quickly realized that we had very similar creative sensibilities, and we were looking for a collaborator at the time, and it was a real organic, natural process for us
Yeah,
to start working together.
we'd both been making our own short films, and we're kind of just interested to find a creative partner who could kind of elevate and push our ideas, and that's what we really do with each other.
Yeah, and so our short films was a really great kind of place for us to develop our visual aesthetic and kind of figure out what kinds of films we wanted to make and what were the themes that were really personal to us. And we discovered through the course of making three shorts that we were really interested in power dynamics.
Gender politics, and kind of trauma, abuse of power.
And really, Violation, our feature, is sort of the culmination of all of those thematic threads. And it comes from a very personal place. Both of us have experienced similarly traumatic moments in our past. And we wanted to talk about it. We wanted to make a film that kind of forces audiences to experience a traumatic episode from the main character's point of view and to encourage conversation because I think this is a really, especially now with the Me Too movement, time's up. I think that we're in a culture now where more people are comfortable having these difficult conversations, and we just really want to try to create space for that.
I think all of our shorts as well have explored topics and things that are difficult for people and challenging for people to talk about. That's something that we're very interested in exploring. But all of our short films were ideas that were very kind of tailored to that medium of filmmaking. None of them really could be features, and this idea really was a feature. It really felt like we wanted to really go in depth with this character and this story, and that was kind of the decision to make that leap.
Yeah, and with this film, we were really interested in, the doing something different in the kind of revenge thriller space. We really love those films, but often you have this kind of cathartic moment of wish fulfillment where the audience cheers and is excited that the main character has got the revenge that they so desperately wanted. And in a way, it kind of glorifies the violence and the horror in those films. And we wanted to do something completely different. We wanted to instead peel back the kind of gruesome layers of revenge and show an audience, what would it really take psychologically, emotionally, how would it erode your moral integrity? And really, the film is designed in a way to kind of scare you into not wanting to seek revenge because you can see how destructive and chaotic it is.
I'm curious. You talked about how you've been working in these kinds of with these kinds of stories for 5 years now, but this particular tale, I mean, it's so complex. The story is so complex emotionally. The storytelling is complex. Your script is very complex. It's told in a non-linear style. When did you start the writing process, and what did that writing process look like? Did the film always look kind of like this, or was this story some did you approach the story or these themes from another angle before you ended up with Violation?
Yeah, we started writing the script for Violation after we had just made Woman in Stall. Um, we were just kind of exploring these ideas and this character, and it really started with the character of Miriam, and this character who's gone through this trauma, and who's been hurt by somebody that she loves and who apparently loves her. We wanted to, because so many revenge films and films that deal with sexual trauma revolve around this stranger in an alleyway, or someone who is kind of quite evil, for lack of a better word. And we wanted to explore what it means for someone close to you to really hurt you in that way. Because there's still so much anger that you feel and so much resentment, but because you have this previous history with them and because of your closeness to them, it's really hard to deal with that. And it's I think a lot of people find it really difficult to talk about it, and to deal with it. And we always structured it in a non-linear way in the script. So that wasn't something that came later. And the reason for doing that is that we were interested in how trauma brings you back into the past.
There's a sense of disorientation that you can sometimes feel when you're thinking about your traumatic episodes, and of course there's this relationship, like Madeleine said, where the past speaks to the present, where it could be a smell, it could be a visual element that kind of triggers an emotional response that brings you back to that moment. And I think we were really interested in trying to capture that feeling for an audience, that feeling of anxiety
and disorientation
and fear, that the main woman Miriam is wrapped up in. She can't escape this feeling throughout the course of the film, and so that was really the goal, is to put the audience in her shoes as much as possible emotionally.
I think one of the things that you also do quite well, you talk a little bit about how, often when we deal with trauma, it comes from people that are close to us. And what I find really interesting here is that you really explore how even the people that didn't directly hurt Miriam indirectly hurt her, like her sister, her husband, her partner. Like it just that comes through really well, and I'm curious um, how you sort of explored that on paper and how that translated onto the screen.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think
Yeah.
we knew, like, even though the film's about revenge, at its heart, it's really a story about sisters. And I think with all of our work, we're really interested in relationships, and familial relationships are really meaningful to us. And Madeline has a a unique relationship with her sister. I have a unique relationship with my brother, and so I think we were really interested in really pulling from our personal experiences, because often when you go through something traumatic, it's very alienating, and often you feel alone and isolated. And what you want most is emotional support from the people that love you. And a big betrayal is when someone close to you denies you that support that you feel you need.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult. It's easy for someone to support you and to get behind you when the trauma comes from someone that is unknown. It's easy um, to kind of vilify that stranger, but when it is somebody, when this act of abuse is from someone who you care about against someone who you care about, it becomes much more complicated and difficult for people to support you and to find that kind of peace and solace. So that was something in the sister relationship that was really kind of vital and interesting to us.
And I think our creative process is really, in many ways, it's a cathartic, therapeutic exercise in exploring our own personal histories and pasts. So a lot of this just stems from long conversations about our own experiences, and trying to capture those experiences with as much authenticity as possible.
I think we also, in the writing process, try to really understand each character. So when we're writing, we'll quite often we'll improvise dialogue scenes with each other and switch the characters up so that we're writing from one perspective, and then when we rewrite the scene, we'll switch the perspectives. And it's really about finding empathy and depth in each character. So there's no everyone's motivations are deeply plumbed so that the characters feel fully fleshed out, and it doesn't ever feel like there's a villain and a hero.
Yeah, it's really easy to make binary characters, and I think what makes the film complex is that one of the characters who does a horrific thing it's a monstrous act is also at times charming and at times loving, and that is really confusing and complicated, but that in many ways captures our own experiences with dealing with family members or friends who've wronged us.
Mhm. So true. I don't think before we sort of move on, I wanted to sort of, Madeline, get your input because this material is so heavy, and it was clearly heavy when you were writing it. And I can't imagine, I can't even begin to think how you managed to get through this both as a writer, as a director, and as the lead actress that has to, basically live through
Yeah,
this again and
I mean,
again and
I think
again.
so much credit goes to Dusty and also to the team that we had, because everyone on our crew, we had such a close small crew. Adam, our DP, and our line producer and first AD, they were all so supportive of my process as an actor, and also just making sure that I had the time to both play the role as director and as the role of Miriam, making sure that I was involved in everything and asking questions. And I think the level of trust that Dusty and I have built in our partnership was really kind of key to me being able to go to those depths as an actor.
But to be fair to Madeline, I feel like I've never seen someone work so hard, because she not only had to prepare as an actor, but she also had to prepare as a director, and that just meant working 18-hour, 19-hour days, which was just insane. But she was so committed to the character and the role, and it was really exciting, I think, for her to be able to push herself physically in such a demanding role. And I think that we would never have been able to get the performances or the moments we got in the film with another actor, just simply because it's just too physically demanding to ask someone to go through these horrific experiences.
Mm. At any point, as you were sort of getting ready to put this out into the world, you're looking for funding and partners. Did you ever get any pushback about, not only the subject matter, but how you handle the subject matter, which is not glorified, it's very realistic and very emotionally heavy?
Mm-hmm.
Not during the financing stage. We were very fortunate. We made this through Telefilm Canada's Talent to Watch program, and it's really artist driven. Um, they give some guidance, but they're really hands off creatively. They're really encouraging and supporting artists to make the films that they want to make. And we also made it through Canada Council and Ontario Arts Council, which again are really artist first funds. So we were just really fortunate, and we were the sole producers. So we didn't have other producers that we had to get run the material through and worry about censorship or things like that. I think really it was the release of the film is when we started to notice um, that it's going to be polarizing, and that different people are going to respond to the material, and it's really helpful to be able to have these kinds of conversations to help contextualize the movie, and help people kind of understand the motivations behind it.
We did know that some of the things were going to be very challenging for audiences, though. For example, full frontal nudity is male nudity is not something that you see often, and not something that people are used to being confronted with. And we knew that was going to make certain people uncomfortable, but we had many conversations about how important that was.
Yeah, we're in this space, we're just so used to seeing women being sexualized, especially in this genre. And in the film, we never see female nudity in a sexualized manner, and there's just something really empowering, I think, to really put a spotlight on that in this film. And like Madeleine said, it was done with intention, and I think we want people to notice that there hasn't been the same amount of male nudity in films. And if people are deeply offended by the male nudity in the film, then it kind of says something, I think, culturally about where we're at as a society, which is intriguing to us to have that conversation.
You spoke earlier about, having a crew and people around you that were really supportive, and you've worked with much of this crew before. And I'm particularly curious about the look of the film because it has a very unique look to it. It's cold, but not really. Like I'm not really sure how to explain it, but the colors and just the aesthetic of it is like beautiful, but also really scary in a very almost unnatural way. And I'm curious about how the conversations that you had with Adam, your cinematographer, about the look of the film. Like what were some of your inspirations, and what were you kind of looking for? What sort of moods were you trying to elicit?
Yeah, we had you just then describing how your take on the visuals of the film reminded me of we had this phrase that we wanted to capture that was a ruthless wilderness. And that was something that kind of sparked our conversations with our DP Adam at the beginning, and that was kind of a jumping off point. But we really spent a long time with him talking about the emotionality of the film and how we wanted the camera to make people feel, how we wanted the visuals to make the audience respond and feel.
Yeah, there's a sort of kinetic energy that's created through the camera movement in the film that I think amplifies Miriam's anxiety. And then also something we developed with Adam across our shorts was this idea of working with all natural light. So we never use lights in the film, and that means we have to really strategically design the shooting schedule around dusk and dawn and midday, and really work closely with our production designer, Joshua Turpin, in exploring how we use lampshades and curtains to shape the light. And so the lighting has this really soft kind of impressionistic quality to it that we were really excited about. We also worked with these really, really old lenses. And what they did was create this intimacy, that amplifying the intimacy in the film. So it's very shallow depth of field, and it's again creating this kind of dreamy quality,
and also a kind of alienation. Like the visuals, like you said, are quite scary and they're quite alienating. The camera is not Miriam's friend. It's kind of observing her story and her emotional unraveling in a way that, yes, I think hopefully, like you said, does push the fear that the audience feels.
And then I think a big part of it is just finding really stark locations that are scary to walk through. We found these woods that were beautiful, and the towering pines. Really, being in those woods at dusk and dawn, it is frightening. There is an ominous, like a natural ominous quality.
Yeah, you feel very insignificant.
Yeah.
And they feel like they're going to eat you alive. It's very, very impressive, the atmosphere that you managed to create, even in just the opening shots. And the other part to that is the music. I mean, the score is haunting. It's so beautiful. I just want to listen to it all the time, even though it's scary as shit, to be totally honest. So and that's the other thing. I was really curious about how Andrea's score sort of played into this. Like, what did she have to begin with? Did you have some music that like some of her stuff already available when you started shooting or editing? Like, how did that come together? Because it's so perfect in every single moment.
Thank you. Yeah, Andrea Boccadoro is actually a man.
Sorry.
He's an Italian composer who's based in London, England. And
I first met Andrea at the Reykjavik Talent Lab in Iceland, and then Madeleine met him in Germany, coincidentally, at another film festival. And we just clicked so much with him, and so we started collaborating with him on our shorts. So he was always someone we knew would be part of our team.
And he's classically trained and very, very talented. But he also likes to experiment and really kind of delve into the emotion of a the films that he works on, and that was like we came up with the he wrote the score for the film. There are 2 classical pieces that he rearranged, but the rest is all his original work. And
he's an incredibly sensitive soul, and I think that we have these creative conversations about what we're looking for. We talk a lot about the style and the tone and how we want to kind of, our influences were Baroque and avant-garde, but it's really his genius to come up with something that's so unnerving and yet so beautiful. Like there's this moment, our favorite moment that he created was when she confronts the wolf, and there's just something so melancholic and yet beautiful about what we're hearing, and it really captures, I think, Miriam's internal turmoil so well. But I think it genuinely comes from his own ability to really feel what the character is feeling, and his acute sensitivity.
And his ideas are also incredibly musically complex. He's doing coming up with rhythms and harmonies that are really unique and beautiful. And I think it's he's not just creating kind of a soundscape, he's creating these incredible standalone pieces that just heighten our immersion in the film.
But one thing I think we learned from this process of working with him on a feature is that we need to involve him much earlier. I think we waited a bit too long, and that's just a lesson for next time, is that he will actually start composing to the script, and I think that's going to be just really exciting to have a little bit more time to develop the sound of the film. But we're just so lucky and fortunate to be working with him, because he really elevated, I think, the film.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, when did he come on board?
Yeah, so COVID really hampered our post-production schedule, and we lost funds, and it ended up ballooning our budget a little bit, and it was really hard to kind of figure out like when we were going to finish the film. And so once we found out we got into TIFF, and then that was the moment we realized, oh, we have to really finish this movie, and there's this hard date to finish it by. So we brought him on in June or July,
Yeah,
but June. But we had been talking with him about the film since last year.
Yeah,
it's just we waited a bit too long because there were so many uncertainties. It wasn't a normal post-production year of making a movie,
and we really run out of money by that point.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't show at all. So congratulations on that front.
Thank you.
One of the things that's really fascinating about the film is how you approach violence. And you've talked a little bit about it, but I'm curious about the actual nuts and bolts of that, because there are scenes where you don't embrace it, but you really tackle it head on. And then there are other moments where you sort of pull back and you don't show it. And I'm curious about what goes into finding that balance, and where did you find that balance of, what to sort of zone in on and what to pull back on?
Yeah, we never wanted the film to feel horrific in the way that kind of something like Saw or Hostel or more kind of straight up horror movies would feel in terms of our approach to violence. We really wanted to let those moments speak for themselves, and in order to really to ground them more, so that the audience is sitting watching this and they're forced to see the whole thing. We're not kind of going in on a gory close-up, you're watching it all play out.
Yeah, I think Steve McQueen's Hunger was a big influence. There's a moment in that film where you're watching someone in a prison just mop up a really filthy hallway for 5 minutes, and it's this really long observational take, but it really puts you inside the horrors of what that prison is like. Cachet is another example. Seeing moments of violence in wides instead of close-ups, but lingering in the wide shots for longer feels more realistic in many ways. It feels like you're actually there, and there's something more horrific about it.
There's a moment in Funny Games, Michael Haneke's Funny Games, where we see this long take of this woman after her family has been murdered, and she gets up and the TV is playing, and you just see in a really, really long take her processing everything that's happened. and her going to, I think she's going over to turn off the TV, but um, you're sitting in that for so long that it becomes incredibly uncomfortable as an audience member, and you start to think about things that you wouldn't think about if the camera cut around and we saw the lacerations on her wrists and we saw a close-up of her face, and it forces you to go past a point where you start to think about new things.
Yeah, so hopefully the violence becomes more contemplative instead of titillating. Like
Yeah.
it really forces you to think about why is there this violence, and what does it mean to get retribution, and what is the toll it takes on our humanity.
I want to come back to some of your inspirations, but before we get there, I was curious about this particular story, and um, you mentioned before the Me Too movement and how that's um, changing things a little bit. But I'm curious, you've been working with these sort of themes for, some time now. And I have you found that the way that we respond that we as a society respond and uh, accept these sort of stories has changed in the time that you've been exploring these stories?
I think people are incredibly uncomfortable talking about things like sexual abuse within families and um, and rape with when it's somebody close to you. I think we can talk about statistics and say it's the statistics of rape victims who have been assaulted by somebody that they're close to are so much higher than when it's a stranger. But when we actually get down to the nitty gritty of looking at what that means and actually talking about our own experiences and confronting the fact that most people who are assaulted by somebody that they're close with, whether it's a friend or a family member or somebody who's in like a confidant or in a position of power. It's really, I don't think people are ready to talk about it. I think
Or
hopefully
not as much as we want them to be.
Yes,
yeah. I think that definitely a film like this, it would have been really hard to make this 10 years ago, because I don't think it's in the zeitgeist of just common culture and conversation. But there, it's the beginning. I think it's the beginning, but it's super early in the beginning, and we feel that very palpably just talking about the film with people, because it's sometimes still very uncomfortable, even in interviews where people want to shy away from the actual topic and talk about other elements of the film. We still experience that today, but it is better, and I think it just requires more films like this, and more conversations to be had, and not giving up on the movement, and also just knowing these movements are like just the beginning of something quite bigger. I think there's a lot of social unrest happening all around the world, and I think it's not going to go away. I think it's only going to keep hopefully pushing down doors.
Yeah, and we've definitely encountered people through all of our films that we've made who have come up to us and said, this really did capture my experience. And particularly with this film, a couple of instances recently of people who had said that they felt that like their experience of being frozen in the moment and having kind of an out of body experience they hadn't seen on film before, and that it really kind of captured that well. So that's when we hear things like that from people, it's very, very encouraging.
You were mentioning some of the films that you mentioned and filmmakers that you mentioned a minute ago. I can kind of see how they have influenced, Violation, because it does have that sort of feel, but it doesn't like directly borrow from any of them. So I'm kind of curious. I know you mentioned that you were kind of racing to finish the film in time for TIFF, but on a sort of a regular, or maybe even during the pandemic if you need to unwind, what are some of the filmmakers and some of the films that you turn to for either inspiration or like to to uh, to unwind or to reinvigorate your passion for filmmaking? What or who do you turn to?
Yeah, I think what's really important is that or to note is that I think when we're writing and we're directing and we're thinking about our own work, we're never consciously thinking about other people's work and trying to figure out what about their work do we like. I think we're just naturally inspired or influenced by some films that we see, and then we start to think about, well, what about that film was so inspiring? What about that moment? And so, for example, like going back to Cachet, there's a moment in that film where there's this really unexpected act of violence that plays out in a wide, and we admired just how effective it was. Yeah, like it caught us so off guard, and even then we're asked to think about it now in reflecting on the film, but I still don't think that in the creative process that we're consciously scrutinizing over our influences. Rather, I think they're just kind of washing over us in a way that naturally permeates through the work that we do.
Definitely, something else that was a very inspiring film to us when we were writing was Fat Girl by Catherine Breillat. There's a real feeling of dread that runs through that film, despite it being kind of on the surface a film about sisters and this complicated sister relationship. And there's also some unflinching male nudity and scenes of real shocking violence in that film as well. I think she did a really great job in that film of balancing different tones.
I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been so amazing. And my final question is kind of moving forward. I know you've just finished this. It's just premiered. The film's fantastic. I hope everybody gets a chance to see it. I should say everyone that wants to see it gets a chance to see it, because it is a difficult film to watch. But I'm curious if you are going to keep working in this sort of with these difficult themes, or if you're prepared to sort of take on something a little more lighthearted for the next one.
I think we'll always be interested in films that challenge audiences, but we're definitely ready to tackle some new themes.
Yeah, I think with our shorts all culminating in Violation, we feel like this particular topic of sexual abuse is kind of it's a nice chapter to kind of close at this point.
We've
in our
said
lives.
what we need to say about it.
Yeah, and I think we're really excited about moving forward. I think the common themes that will continue to run through our work is we're really interested in interpersonal relationships between families and
power dynamics
between men and women, and really hopefully the films that we make will continue to be visceral, thought-provoking, and challenging.
And that was my conversation with the writer-directors of Violation, Madeleine Sims Feuer and Dusty Mancinelli.